This is Valerie.
And this is Jacinta.
And you're listening to Catholics, a Catholic podcast by millennials for millennials.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hi, welcome back to the podcast. It's Jacinta
and Valerie.
This is Catholics podcast live from St. Louis, Missouri. It felt like misery the past couple days because it was hot as Hades. And I think we're past that now.
Yes, we're past it. No 90-degree days in the 10-day forecast.
Yeah, I mean, I just grew up in Oklahoma, and I remember the heat, and I escaped it, and now I'm back, and so it's not that fun, you know?
Yes.
But we're not here to talk about the heat. We're here to talk about pro-life issues. It's a hot-button topic, and we literally just recorded this episode, or so we thought. We recorded it, but we don't feel like, I hate it when people say that. It was Satan who somehow deleted the episode. So here we are again.
Yeah, we were recording for 35 minutes, and I clicked on it to see like what time we were at, and nothing was recording. So anyway, I probably just made a mistake, but clearly the devil was trying to get his hand, and he was happy that we didn't get to say what we did. But joke's on him because we're back, and we're going to remember what we said, and maybe
hopefully it'll be better than next time.
Yeah, hopefully it'll just be better than next time.
So yeah, that's what we're here for. We're here to talk about this hot button issue of abortion because it's been legal since 1973, and I grew up pro-life. I'm one of 5. Valerie, you're one of like
3.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm from a small Catholic family.
And my mom told me a story once about me, yours truly. I'm the 5th, and we didn't have a lot of money growing up. My dad has his own pest control business, so he's kind of ADHD like myself. He knows a lot of people, but he could get a little bit more organized. Anyways, I shouldn't be saying this about my dad, and I'm on the air. I love you, Dad. Anyways, we grew up poor. I digress. We grew up poor, and I remember whenever my mom, well, I don't remember, but my mom said that when she was pregnant with me, some people were like, oh my gosh, you're pregnant again? You can't afford it. Like, right. You should have an abortion. And now that I'm thinking about that, I'm like, oh my gosh, my life and who I am and my dignity and my value and my worth is so much more than being able to afford. And we made it work, you know?
Right, yeah. And I mean, it's really a hot button issue right now.
Yeah.
Because it's been a hot button issue for years, but I feel like especially this year in the United States because of recent conservative legislature that has been passed, I shouldn't even just say conservative.
I hate that.
There's been legislation passed on both sides of this spectrum.
But I hate that we have to say conservative and liberal. I
just
don't like it.
Very true.
Yeah.
But it was just how I was describing the way that it has been.
I'm not
how the culture teaches us to describe it.
Exactly.
But anyway, there's been bills passed on both sides. On the conservative side, as much as I Jacinta spilling her beer. She had to have a beer because we experienced that.
Okay.
Yep. Nope. That's the T-shirt I used to remove fingernail polish, so it's good.
Okay. Cool. We're back in action. I'm back in action.
We recorded in my bedroom, so did anyone spill on my bed? I don't think so.
A little bit, but it's gone. I'm so
okay,
sorry.
Great. It's good. It's good.
It's all good.
It's all good.
The show must go on.
The show must go on. We're not re-recording this time.
Okay.
So as I was saying. As you know, there was bills passed, like the heartbeat bill, which is good, but then there's also been really extreme pro-abortion laws passed, like in New York, which allows legal abortion up to birth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, both sides of the spectrum. But we're not really going to be talking specifically about
politics,
just our beliefs in politics. A little bit,
there's a place for that, but
yeah, it's just not really what we're going to talk about. Also, since it's a Catholic podcast and we know most of our listeners are Christian, a lot of you probably already have a majority of pro-life beliefs. If you're not pro-life, we still want you to be listening because we're going to say some things that you might find of interest to just ponder. But we want to talk more about what the best way to discuss the pro-life argument with to how to talk about it with someone who leans more pro-choice. Mm-hmm. And if you are pro-choice and you're listening to this and you have questions, feel free to DM us at Catholics Podcast on Insta, and we'll do our best to answer any questions you have as quickly as possible. But I'm going to give this over to Jacinta because she works full-time in the pro-life movement currently for an organization called Students for Life.
Yeah.
She's the regional coordinator for Missouri and Arkansas, and she works with
college students.
mainly college students, and their pro-life organizations. So, Jacinta, I'm not particularly skilled in talking to folks about the pro-life argument as you are, so I'm probably going to have some questions for you along the way. And I assume since I'm wondering if I have these questions, our listeners might have them as well. So
Yeah, totally.
So we're just going to it's going to be more of a question and answer, and Jacinta is going to talk a little bit about the details and nitty-gritty more. And as I think of things, I'll kind of throw things in. And since we already recorded this once, I know Jacinta has a really good way to start in talking about what being pro-life is.
Yeah, so it bugs the crap out of me when people say that, oh, you're an anti-abortion group. No, we're more than that.
Yeah.
We're not just anti-abortion.
Sure.
Being pro-life doesn't mean just anti-abortion. Being pro-life means that all life is valuable from the moment of conception to natural death and everybody in between. That
Right.
homeless man on the street, that person that annoys you, that person that doesn't have a lot of friends, they are worthy of our love, have value, and they're worthy of respect.
Right. Immigrants, the LGBTQ plus community. All those people.
Q plus all those 23 consonants. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I had to
We're supposed to be
loving. I'm
here.
sorry. I'm being a jerk right now. It's just because I'm
We're just already
fired up
recording this
after,
a second time.
Yeah,
Anyway,
anyway.
But yes, those people are all worth love and respect because
Amen.
they're human beings and they have dignity as a human being.
Amen.
Even if they don't agree with your religious beliefs, even if they don't agree with your political beliefs, on and on and on and on.
Yes. No, I totally agree
And that's
with
what
that.
being pro-life is.
Amen. Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to reclaim a culture of life. And I defer to St. John Paul II because he is the man. And just his life story is amazing. I read a biography by Jason Everett, who wrote a book about his life, which is really good. It's called His Five Loves. Shout out.
Great
Put that
book.
in the show notes.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, I've read that book twice, and I wept at the end of it because it was so
amazing.
good. Yeah. So during reading that book, I learned that St. John Paul II lived during a time of great oppression and suffering. He lived during a time of the Nazi regime when communism was running rampant in Poland. Even in his own family life, he lived during a time of great suffering. Before he was born, his sister died. When he was just very small, his mother had died. When he was 11 years old, his brother, who was a doctor, had contracted an illness from one of his patients, and his brother died. And so it was just him and his dad for the longest time. And one day, St. John Paul II comes home from work, and he walks into his house, and he found his father dead. And he said, at the age of 20, I've lost all the people that I love. And it didn't stop with his family. Some of his friends had died because of the Nazi regime and all of those things going on. He would be at Mass celebrating because he was an altar server, and he would hear bombs going off. And so he lived during this time of great suffering and great oppression. And if you can think about, like, going through all of that and knowing who he is now, he has so much joy, or who he became. He didn't call that time a culture of death, but he calls the time that you and I live in today a culture of death. And it's because there is an outright disrespect for human life, and abortion is at the heart of that. So that's why this is such a big issue, and we need to stop it, and we need to get to the root of it and save lives.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first question I would have is, how do you even begin the conversation? So a few of the questions that I kind of thought of that I would start with, that I've been told to start with, would be asking the person where they believe human life begins, so that you're at a clear understanding of where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, because they may not agree with abortions up to birth. You
Sure.
know, they may think that's totally wrong. So you don't want to be talking about that, and then they're like, oh no, I agree. You know, when you could have spent that time talking to them about where they're at. So I guess that for me would be the best place to start. Would you agree?
Totally, yeah, and that's what we do on campus, is we have, like, a human rights display, and we say, hey, when do you think life begins? And a lot of people put viability. I was at MSU this weekend, and a lot of people put at conception, so I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, because it's a state school. You have people coming in from all over.
Sure.
Yeah. So from that, a lot of people put the heartbeat. Then you can start where they're at and meet them where they're at. And so some people will put the heartbeat, and I'll say, okay, that's awesome. a heartbeat is a sign of life, but let's think about like what happens at the moment of conception. At the moment of conception, 23 chromosomes from dad and 23 from mom come together, and everything about you is put in place. Your hair color, your eye color, all your traits and your characteristics, your gender, everything is determined in that moment. And everything about you is unique and unrepeatable and is decided in that one moment. And that's a miracle in and of itself.
Right.
And so I'll tell them this, and then you'll see the wheels turning, and a lot of people change their minds.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's a good place to start then. So that
Yeah.
confirms that what I've been taught and told is a good place to
Sure.
start. And then I guess, like you said, when you said the students that you were just speaking to recently, a lot of them did say conception. I guess my next question would be if they believe that meaningful value to the life begins at conception. Because they may believe that life begins there,
Right.
but do they believe it's really meaningful life? And that's where a big problem comes in, too.
And there's a big problem, and we need to get to the root of that and tease that out, too.
Right. So that would probably might be my next question. If, where do you think the meaningful value of life begins, which we still believe is at conception?
Right, totally.
Okay, so those are good places to start then.
Yeah, and so something that we want to, like, bring up is that to be pro-life, you don't have to be religious. And the pro-life argument isn't a religious argument. It's a human rights argument.
Right. So we'll talk about that in a little bit here, but I definitely want to come back to that because I have strong feelings around that topic. What are a lot of the common counter arguments that you'll get from people? You mentioned earlier viability.
Yeah.
So explain to us a little bit about what people mean when they say, like, I believe life begins at viability, and why we disagree with that.
Yeah, so they just don't believe that because the baby can't survive on its own, it's viable, because it's dependent on the mom for life. But I don't think that that's a good argument, because we're all dependent from one level or another. I'm dependent on you to bring me friendship and to help me record this podcast.
True,
right?
and I mean, even more important than that, I'm reliant on our farmers to farm food because I couldn't farm by myself.
Exactly. So we're all dependent from one level to another. It just looks different based on where you're at in life.
Right.
And so
like,
we can have these conversations and get people thinking about
that.
Yeah,
and just a little bit more on this, because if you don't mind, I was thinking about this the other day, and specifically the viability. And, someone may say to you, like, well, you could grow your own food. Like, people can live without others. And sure, they probably physically could if you had the skills to do it. But think back to, like, even hunters and gatherers. I'm assuming that they weren't one person for each individual. Like, you weren't one man for yourself.
Right.
Right? Like, you were still in a community of people. And I'm assuming that, the men went and hunt, the women would help cook, they all had to help can, they had to help clean and keep the community together. Like, they weren't just one man for himself.
Right.
So we've really never been viable by ourselves. We've always relied on others in some way.
And even Hillary Clinton would agree with that, because she says it takes a village.
It takes a village, and that's really true.
So there's some truth in what she's saying, too. Because
there is. It does take
a
village. We need each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think...
I'm not advocating for her. I'm just saying there's truth in
that. We're not
that,
advocating for any political figure.
I'm not. Oh, yes. Thank you. Disclaimer. No, this is not the place for that. But I'm just saying that even somebody like her, who is super pro-choice and mixed up in her beliefs, still sees the need for community.
Yeah, and that's important. And that's why we disagree with the viability argument, because none of us are viable on our own. And even on a more simple level, is that, like, just because a baby is born outside of the womb doesn't mean it's not relied on. It still needs to rely on the mother and the father
for food and
shelter and
care and love,
doctors that help
to wipe the baby's bottom,
all these things.
Right.
It's not just because it's outside the womb now doesn't mean it's viable.
Right.
And I think even most pro-choice people would say that once the baby's born, you can't just kill it.
I think so too.
I would think most people are at that level.
And at the heart of this argument is relativism. It's relativism.
Yes.
And I remember a professor at the Augustine Institute one day in class, he said, like, relativism is running rampant in our culture, and people are picking and choosing even what they want to be relativistic with, because you don't ever hear about somebody being relativistic with sports. If they were, could you imagine if somebody was relativistic about the Stanley Cup? about the
Yeah, no,
Blues winning.
there was a winner and a loser.
Right.
There was no relativism there.
Yeah. And so there's no relativism in sports. There's no relativism in money. You can't go into Forever 21 with $2 and try and buy a $20 blouse. That's just not going to work.
Right. You either
You
have the
can't be
money
like,
or you
oh,
don't.
well, I believe this is $20, so it must be.
Yeah.
And with healthcare, if you need a brain surgeon to perform brain surgery on you, you bet.
There's no.
Yeah, you are going to get the best brain surgeon ever. You're not going to get some guy who's like, oh, well, I believe I'm a good brain surgeon, whatever. But with healthcare, there is some relativism trickling in because you see Planned Parenthood talking about, oh, well, this is healthcare for women. This is not healthcare. This is abortion, and that's all y'all do. So
Right.
it is trickling into the healthcare system in that way, saying that abortion is healthcare when it's not. It's murder.
Right.
Let's
So
call a spade a
relativism.
spade. Yeah.
Yeah. Relativism.
Do you see what I'm trying to say there?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So I guess my next question then would be, what does science tell us?
Yeah, science tells us that a fetus is a human life. I already mentioned that everything about you is put in place at the moment of conception.
All
the 23
chromosomes.
Chromosomes from dad, 23 from mom. Can't talk right now. We'll just go with this. The baby has brain waves at 42 days. 21 days, the baby's heart is beating for the very first time. Like, the baby is literally, like, tiny, and the heart is beating, which is so cute.
It's so cute.
It is adorable.
And at that point, because correct me if I'm wrong, most women don't even know they're pregnant until
later
almost that point anyway.
Yeah.
So even if you believe that, which because of the chromosomes and there's other scientific things we have, that we're talking about, that we believe that, and science tells us that life begins at conception.
Mm-hmm.
Even if someone believes that it's at a heartbeat, that rules out most women that are going in for an abortion at that point anyway, because the baby already has a heartbeat.
Exactly.
When they're going in for that procedure, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, so keep going with the science.
Yeah. So they have all body systems present at 8 weeks. They can feel pain all body systems present at 8 weeks.
At 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Yeah. 8 of 40.
Yeah. Which is so early on. And then they can feel pain at 20 weeks. 23 weeks, they can survive prematurely. My friend in Pennsylvania had her son at 22 weeks, and he was able to survive, and we know him now as, he's like a 16-year-old kid, but it's just like, whoa.
Right.
He was like this big when she showed me pictures of when he was like conceived, or when he was born
at 22 weeks.
Yeah.
That was a Freudian slip if you ever heard one. Anyway. But yeah, that's only going to get earlier and earlier as technology advances.
Exactly.
That babies are going to be able to survive outside of the womb at earlier and earlier stages if medically necessary, if something were to happen.
Exactly.
It's obviously not
science points to the fact that this is a human life. And if it sounds like we're like splitting hairs with this, I think it's pretty important to split hairs when it comes to human life.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
these are the facts.
These
are the facts.
This
we don't have to like dress it up or anything. This is just, it is what it is. And this is why we do what we do with Students for Life, is we separate. It's a secular organization, so there's no religion involved. And we have these conversations and educate people, and you see the light bulb go off.
With the science.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of leads
philosophy.
me. Yeah. That kind of leads me into my next, the big question I have is, for me, things that I've went to, religion is still such a big part of this topic and this conversation, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's so much, if all the science points to that baby being a life at conception, that fetus being a life at conception, being a human being, why are we still saying so often, oh, it's because God created us as a life? I'm not saying that's not important. I believe that.
Right. But we shouldn't be going there because that doesn't help anybody.
But it doesn't help people. That's not the only part of it. Like, you can be a pro-life and not believe in God.
And we need to be educating people. We need to be educating ourselves, because that's, they call that fideism, faith without reason. Like, we need to research. We need to educate ourselves. We need to look into things so that we can explain them to other people and so that we can grapple with it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that just sounds like a cop-out to me. Like what you just said.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not meeting people where they're at, in my opinion.
No, it's just like, oh, this is, of course we're pro-life. of course, we know that life has value and is unique and unrepeatable. But that doesn't help anybody to say, like, oh, well, just say what you just said. Life comes from God, and that's why.
Right. And do I believe that? Absolutely, I believe that. And absolutely, I believe God values are in lives. But I also believe that that's why he created science the way he did, to prove it without
the faith.
Without the faith. We want everyone to have faith, but you can still reach people through the science, I believe, of this argument.
Yeah,
and that's why I agree, personally, like, do I believe that abortion is wrong because of my religion? Not really. I mean, that's how I came to the topic, but I now believe that abortion is wrong because science tells me it is.
Right.
I would believe it's wrong because of my religion, too.
Sure.
But I believe it's wrong and should be illegal because of science.
Exactly.
Not because I want to make everyone Christian, which I do. Totally do.
Catholics podcast.
But I don't believe that doing it through government is the way to go. That's just a personal opinion. But I don't think that abortion is a matter of, a church and state issue. I think abortion is a science issue.
It's a human rights issue.
It's a human rights issue.
Which is backed up by science.
Right, which is backed up by science.
And philosophy and logic.
Right. You know, it's...
Take the religious argument out.
You can take the religious argument out of it and still have... You can still point to being pro-life.
Right.
And pointing to that fetus is a human being at conception. Science points us there.
It's so funny because I've worked with atheists in the pro-life movement. There's this girl in Colorado that I worked with and that we would do sidewalk counseling with. And I saw her have conversations with people outside of the clinic, and she reached so many more people as an atheist than I could as a Catholic. And
that's she wasn't putting religion into it. She was meeting people where they're at, religious or not.
And they're like, oh, okay, I can relate to this person. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's... I think the reason this has become particularly, like, on my heart recently, the science and the religious aspect, is I've been to a couple pro-life events recently. Great events. They're doing great work. Beautiful work. Don't get me wrong.
Totally.
But there was a lot of prayer and a lot of reading of scripture, which I believe would turn people off that aren't already religious. So I just kind of want to make these events more based on science and why it really should be... why abortion should be wrong and why it should be illegal, not just because God says so. Which should be the biggest reason for all of us. But unfortunately, not everyone has that faith, and it should still be illegal because it's life, scientifically.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's a big thing I've been thinking about recently.
Those are some good thoughts. Yeah, and so where's the place for the atheists for life? Where do they go?
I feel like we don't have a place for them in a lot of these groups right now.
Well, Students for Life welcomes them.
Which is great. One group. Because that's a group I believe that is in the pro-life movement and is giving it the scientific value, like showing the science as it deserves to be shown.
Right.
Rather than just quoting scripture to them. Because I don't think that's going to help most people.
Yeah.
Because most people already know that. Because if you're a Christian, you already, hopefully, know why that God tells us that.
Exactly.
You know, and science helps to... And again, that's why I go back to God created the science the way he did. I'm not discounting Christ.
It's mind-blowing.
I'm not discounting God the Father from it.
No, I know.
He created it like that.
And it's mind-blowing because when you look at the human body, you're like, whoa, it can do all of these things? It's
because God created it exactly like that. And I think he created it so that we could talk to people about science, knowing that you can show it with clear evidence.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Jim Gaffigan right now. Again, I'm sorry.
That's okay. He's great.
He's like, women have the ability to grow a baby in their body. And he was like, then by some miracle, they give birth to the baby through their body. And then they feed the baby with their body. And he was like, when you look at the man's contribution.
Right. Like, I mean, God created our bodies to work the way they do.
Right.
You know? And again, going back to bodies, then we come up with the theology of the body.
Oh my gosh, which we're going to have a whole episode on.
We're going to have a chastity and theology of the body
talk about it and geek out over it.
Right, because when you really start to look at chastity, and when I say chastity, I don't mean chastity in the way of abstinence. That's part of it, but it's not just, abstinence is just refraining from something.
It's not enough to say no to something.
That's not all chastity is. Like, there's so much more to chastity, and we'll come back to that. Because even married couples have to practice chastity even if they're not abstaining.
Exactly. You
So-
don't just use each other in the marriage. Like, that's
Right,
toxic.
totally. Right. So we'll come back to that and have another episode on that. But when you really start to break this down, when you're talking about abortion and those things, you know, chastity becomes the most empowering
Option.
the most empowering option. It's
And
not the
it's like-
only option.
I
You know,
was
it's-
listening to something today. A guy who was talking about chastity. He's 29. He's really good looking. And he
Doesn't
was... it only helps. And he was talking about how he's waiting for his bride. And
Right.
I was like, that's authentic love.
Right.
Like,
So we'll
that's
come back
true
to that.
real love.
We'll have a whole
Yeah.
episode on that because we think it's important.
And that's what these women deserve.
But
that
that's
are
what these
out
women
in-
deserve.
that are going into the clinic. They haven't been educated on their value and their dignity and their worth. But also, in that moment, we need to be educating them on their options and telling them
Right.
that
And
life...
supporting them.
Yeah, support.
Did we talk about support in the first time
We
we
did,
recorded
but
this?
not this
this
time.
one? See, I
Yeah.
can't even remember. Because support was a big thing we discussed in the last one.
Yeah.
Because so many times I've seen, you know, pro-life women tell women that are facing an unplanned pregnancy and considering abortion as an option that they made a mistake, and that rather than going to them and saying, I want to support you through this and show them how you can support this,
Uh-huh.
that if you don't support them and you just like shun them or make
Yeah.
them feel guilty, that's not going to help. That's not going to make them choose
Choose
not
life.
to have an abortion. It's not going to make them choose life. If you come at them with with respect
Mm-hmm.
and support, sometimes these women don't, a lot of times, these women don't want to have an abortion. They just feel it's the only option they have.
They want
And if
somebody
you
to
come
tell
at
them
them
you're
and
better.
support them and tell them you're better and you're worth
Yeah.
more and that I want to support you through this and I'm going to show you how I can support you through this, that sometimes is all they need to choose life.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough.
Yeah.
You know, I worked for a Christian maternity home when I was in college, and while it was a Christian maternity home, the first thing we did was just show the women that they're worth and that they have support with them. And they were obviously coming to us because they wanted some sort of support and they knew they were lacking that, and they didn't want to have an abortion. They wanted support. So they reached out to us first, and when they saw that they had support,
Mm-hmm.
they obviously didn't want an abortion at that point.
Exactly.
They saw that support and they stayed with us, and and then we led them into a relationship with Jesus. But that wasn't the first thing we did. We didn't come at them with scripture. We
Yeah.
came out with them with support and then led them into a relationship with
Support
Jesus
and
from there,
love. Yeah.
which is beautiful.
Yeah.
So don't think, oh my gosh, this girl's so liberal. She's not Catholic. She doesn't
Nobody's
think we should
thinking
talk about
that.
God. That's not what I mean. Please do not get the wrong impression.
No, that's not
I
what
just
we're
mean
thinking.
we need to come at people where they're at, and we need to make science the reason that it's the right now it's the easiest way to explain to people to meet them where they're at, especially for people who aren't believers.
Exactly.
And I think that's the best way to reach people right now.
We're meeting the guy at Yale University who could be a future politician, who could change a law, and we're changing his mind on abortion. Like,
Right.
This is and
Not just
you do
because-
that
yes.
with science and philosophy. You don't do that because you don't throw a Bible at them.
No, you don't. And do I hope we can lead them into a relationship with Jesus
Of
by
course.
befriending them? Of course I do.
Yeah.
I want to make everyone Christian. Like, don't get me wrong. I love God. I want everyone to experience
You
His
have a
beauty through
podcast
that.
called Catholics.
Right,
I think
like,
we all know that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we're always going about this the right way. Like
Yeah.
you said, if we just throw a Bible at them,
Yeah.
it's not helping.
It might hurt a bit.
Yeah. But if you come out with them love and support and show them that they deserve more, and
and talk
you
about
show
our
the
options.
science to it.
Talk about our options.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't look at this as just the only option. To see that life is the empowering option. That the solution to the problem isn't abortion, but the solution is more healthcare, more authentic love, more compassion, more nonviolent options to
more
help
support.
women.
Yeah. Yep. So, okay, do you want to do a quick recap of how to talk to someone who's pro-choice, which is what we've been talking about?
Sure. Just come at them with a Bible and say, hey, have you... No, I'm just kidding.
Have you listened to our episode?
I'm
No.
just messing with
Oh,
you.
one thing we didn't talk about, I don't think, in this episode, which is the first thing we should have mentioned, is listen.
Yeah.
And not just hear, listen and take out where they're in. And I think we started to say that because we had questions that it's best to pose to them and ask what they believe and where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
because then you can best respond to their questions, best respond to their side of the conversation, rather than just spewing all these facts you've memorized and they're like, yeah, I agree with that, but here's why I don't.
Right.
And then you can say, okay, based on what you've said, here's why I don't agree.
Yes. Yeah.
So the first couple questions that I mentioned that Jacinta agreed with would be, where do you believe life begins, and where do you believe that life has value?
Right. And those are awesome questions to ask. And that really gets the conversation going.
And let them talk.
Yeah. We were in D.C. in July talking to people about abortion, and I had my friend there who was watching me talk to these people, and I let him, like, critique me. And there were a couple times where I did come across as a little bit too much.
Sure.
But then I toned it down a bit.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, I really liked what you did this time because you were actively listening, and I could tell it was genuine, and I could tell you weren't waiting for your turn to talk.
That's
and
a
that
big
you
thing.
were listening to what they said, you
Yes.
reciprocated it, and then you added your thoughts to
Yes.
it, and that's how conversations go. So basically, we just want to get the
a normal
conversation-
dialogue,
Yes!
not just a...
Get the conversation going.
Yeah, get the conversation going in a natural way. Listen, and then, start to base your response, not just all these, I want to tell them this and this and this. Base your response based off what they've told you they believe.
Yes, and that's how you meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
That's how you meet them where they are, and that's what we want to do, because any little movement to change their mind on abortion is a step in the right direction.
Right. And it might not happen all at once.
And it probably won't, because most of the time
It's
it
hard.
didn't, and it only happened a couple times.
Yeah. But maybe it just gets them thinking and talking to other people.
Exactly.
And your conversation may just spark them to do a little more research on their own, which is ultimately, or talk to more people. And that's
Exactly.
ultimately what will change their mind. So it takes time,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes prayer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing that we can do without telling them, I've been praying for you. Just pray and don't tell anyone you've been praying for them.
Yeah.
Just pray for them. And then
And
when
they
you
don't
have
wanna
that
feel
conversation,
patronized
meet them where they're
anyways.
at. You know,
Yeah.
meet them where they're at. And
Yeah.
So I had a thought, and now I can't remember. Oh, no. If you have any questions based off what we said, if you're pro-choice and you have questions about being pro-life, definitely reach out. If you're pro-life and you have questions about what we said, or about how to talk to someone, or maybe there's someone in particular that you've been kind of wrestling with and not know how to talk to them, for sure, reach out to us. We'd love to help you in any way we can. Like I said, Jacinta does this full time, so
Yep.
she's been trained. She knows what she's talking about. We're not just shooting the breeze with you here.
I hope we're not. Otherwise,
Sometimes
my
we do
boss
that,
is going
but
to listen and be like,
Sometimes
"Dude,
we
why
do that,
did I
but
hire you?" No,
but
I'm
we're
kidding.
really
Yes.
this is what we believe, and this is
Amen.
what we know is true. We don't
know
just
it.
believe it; we know it to be true because of science.
Science tells us all of these things, and it's really fascinating too. So I would encourage everybody to just find their place in the pro-life movement.
Maybe it's just starting out by prayer. Maybe you don't
Amen.
have time or money to give. Start with prayer.
Just pray. Yeah, because there's so much spiritual warfare that comes with doing this work. I've never felt more attacked in my life.
Right, and we just talked about we experienced spiritual warfare recording the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I either hit the wrong button, which I still believe, maybe the devil prompted me to hit the wrong button, or he shut off the recording. I'm not really sure what happened, but he was probably trying to shut us down.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed longer, and we got her done, because we wanted to tell you this because we believe it to be very important.
Yeah, and maybe your place in the movement isn't being on the front lines and having these conversations with people about abortion. Maybe it's not being in front of Planned Parenthood. Maybe it's being a youth minister somewhere and building a culture of life that way. Maybe it's speaking about chastity and promoting theology of the body, which I believe is going to end this.
Yep. Maybe you have a little extra cash that you can find a local resource that you're able to donate that to.
Right.
There's local pregnancy centers all over, maternity homes, places like Thrive that all, really are trying to promote a culture of life and offer resources for women.
And
So if you have money or time or both, those are great places to reach out to and see how you can be involved.
Yeah, and I feel like the liberal in the pro-life movement, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think, I said it in the beginning, that being pro-life isn't just anti-abortion.
Right.
It's loving and respecting everybody in
Yes.
between. So I'm going to take this a little bit further and say maybe you don't do anything in the pro-life movement. Maybe you're not talking to people about abortion. Maybe you're not praying in front of Planned Parenthood, but maybe you can do your part in the pro-life movement by not being a jerk to people. Maybe you don't use cutting sarcasm, because when we cut people down and when we tear people down, that's participating in a culture of death.
So yeah,
and we're better than that, and we need to be building up a culture of life.
yeah.
So you can even start with something as small as that, and that's why I sound so liberal in the pro-life movement.
No, but that's totally true.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
by
you
that?
start just by treating every human as
With
a human
love and
with love and respect.
Yes.
That's the very root. That's the base root.
Yeah.
And then you can find other sectors if you want to get more involved, whether it's the women and abortion, if that part of the issue, whether it's immigrants,
homeless ministry,
any of those types of things where people aren't being valued.
There's so many
mental
places.
health.
Yeah.
Mental health.
There's so many places.
Things
to
like
start.
assisted suicide. That's a whole nother issue in the pro-life. Euthanasia. All those things are
so many life issues.
People not treating elderly with respect. You go into nursing homes and sometimes those people aren't
the Little
treated.
Sisters of the Poor, whatever city you're in right now. We have listeners all over. The Little Sisters of the Poor have hospitality centers where they care for, I used to do this in Philadelphia with some people. I would go visit nursing homes and
yeah, totally.
They love seeing young people, and that gives them so much life. So we all have a place where we can serve, and you know where that is, and if you don't, pray about it, and hopefully God will reveal that to you.
And if you're in the St. Louis, or even if you're not, and you're not quite sure where to start, feel free to reach out to us. We have people we could get you in contact with if you want to get more involved. Like I said, I worked for a teen maternity home, so I have some contacts in the St. Louis area specifically with that maternity home. So shout out to the Sparrow's Nest in O'Fallon.
What?
So yeah, so if you have more questions or you want to know how to get involved more, feel free to reach out on Instagram, or we have an email. I guess you could email us too if you don't do Instagram. It's ogcatholics
at
gmail.com. So, or you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Catholics Podcast, and go follow us there. If you're a YouTube person, like and subscribe. All those things. And we want to thank you for listening and sticking around with us.
We'll keep them coming, man.
We really enjoy being able to do this for you, and we've received a lot of good feedback recently from people that have been listening. So that's really empowering for us, and it keeps us motivated, and it's the way of the Holy Spirit reminding us that we're doing His will, and that's what we're really trying to do. So thank you so much to everyone who's reached out and said just encouraged us in any way. So
amen.
We'll be praying for you. We ask for your prayers, and specifically with the issue of life in our culture today.
Amen. And I second everything that she said.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks for
so
listening.
much, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.